And welcome to another live edition of Blacklisted Radio. It's the 18th day of January 2015. My name is Doug Owen, and I am the senior editor of blacklistednews.com, your host for this show, our weekly wrap-up of news, headlines, current events, music, art, politics, geopolitics, parapolitics, deep politics. We talk about a lot of different things here. You can, of course, join us at blacklistedradio.com. That is the hub for the show. Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time is when we do this thing live. And, of course, the podcast you can find in a variety of formats, including our YouTube channel. We put the shows up on YouTube. We have a Roku channel for you out there having those streaming devices, which I find to be just so handy-dandy. I was actually watching a YouTube podcast from Joe Rogan talking with Shane Smith of Vice the other day. And, both of those guys are kind of enigmatic. You have somebody like Shane Smith, and if you're not familiar, I would imagine most of you are, but he is the man, the front man for Vice Media. And he is, somebody that I have a lot of respect for because he does believe in citizens journalism, and he is maybe not through actions, and I've heard a lot of things about the way that they actually treat their writers, but just the fact that he has gone to so many different corners of the earth to bring us really interesting stories, I find admirable. And the fact that he has been kind of an operator in some of these very big stories, like the cracking of the Hermetic Kingdom of North Korea and his ties to North Korea, and just some of the diplomacy and deep politics that he has had a hand in. I find him to be a suspect, and I can't help it. I'm just a skeptic. At the end of the day, that's really where I find myself. I don't want to think that everything's a grand conspiracy, but there's plenty of business plans, motives, and propaganda that we're going to break down tonight on the show that you can find plenty of that flows through Vice Media. And by the way, Bill Maher, heavily invested, definitely a lot of agendas. So not my conjecture, opinion that they've really leaned left on a lot of the coverage. And if independent writers and journalists feel that you having the right to own a firearm is really at the detriment to the people of this country, and it's the biggest problem we have, then, shame on them. But if it's part of a larger agenda, and I think that that's what Bill Maher has, not that I really even care. Where are we at today where comedians, Jon Stewart, Bill Maher, Rachel Maddow, even politicians are comedians and are seen as truth tellers and more reputable than the media itself. Never before have we seen the American public primarily disregard the truthfulness or the validity of mainstream media like we have today, just on every level. But anyway, I was watching one of these video podcasts, and before you ask, I've thought about doing this on video, but really, watching me talk with the cans on through a microphone, I can only imagine would be so entertaining. But we get asked about it a lot. And, if we had more guests in studio, maybe that would be, or make more sense. It would be more of a asset to the show. But regardless, I was listening to his take on what we have going on today, and so much of it, I'm just like, yeah, exactly, Shane. Tell me more. And the one thing I thought was really interesting was he said that, the one common bind that all governments across the West and in Asia and Russia and the powerhouses and even the developing nations all have in common is terrorism. It's a common thread. It's something that we all have to deal with, and that should be really the focus for a more centralized government and a centralized policy, and it should be a way to bring nations together. And I'm just horrified thinking about, what that really means. I mean, it sounds good, and I don't know how deep Mr. Smith, is, taking this topic or the possible solutions that he's promoting in saying this. Because, it's one thing to say, yeah, we feel good and we should all be fighting terrorists. And, oh, man, people buy into that and they love that idea. It is working quite well in Europe. And the common bind that I see is that we have governments that are using terrorism, manufactured, organic, and flavors in between there to give themselves more authoritarian power in the hopes of protecting you. And that's what an honest politician, if there are such creatures out there, would and is right now, I guess, promoting that we need more power to keep you protected, and that we need more of an integrated security apparatus to keep us safe. And that's why we should work with Russia and work with all these other nations to keep them safe from terrorists. So, just thinking about that in and of itself, and some of the philosophies that he was putting out there just kind of blew me away. And usually I don't comment on other shows, but there is a lot of people out there. The guy's worth over $400 million. Okay, there's a lot of people that pay attention to Vice Media. It's not really alternative media any longer or independent media. It is mainstream media. If you can turn on HBO and watch Vice, it's pretty mainstream. Same goes for a lot of these cable network news shows. But I think that if you don't watch at least some of it, then you are missing out on all of the memes and all of the narratives that are being put forward to sell people on a globalized police state. I know that's a generic term, but a globalized police state is kind of where we see people moving towards, and the popularity thereof is debatable. It's arguable how many people actually want this police state. But let me tell you, the attack on Charlie Hebdo in France has paved the way for fanatics, terrorists, and other people in government to, yeah, I did that. I put them all together to really come to the forefront and tell people what they want. So, if you've been paying attention this week, you've seen the terror raids in Belgium. Few terrorists dead. Basically raiding a lot of terrorist alleged sympathizers, rabble-rousers, social media networks, technocrats. What's happening in Belgium is pretty disturbing. And of course, France, you now have standing armies protecting the people, using this excuse for, or using these attacks as an excuse for a complete power grab and to have an occupied city. So I was looking at some of the headlines here, just a few. Soldiers to guard Belgian Jewish sites as Europol warns of further attacks. Protection stepped up across Europe, with the UK police on the highest alert level ever in the wake of a series of terrorist incidents. Europe remained on high alert as soldiers were deployed alongside police in Belgium to protect Jewish buildings, and the head of Europol warned that further terrorist attacks could not be ruled out because, of course, they don't have every person mic'd. They don't have complete omnipresent surveillance yet. And if they did, oh man, we could prevent things just like this. It's pretty telling. If you watch the speech with Barack Obama, of course, his solution to everything is take advantage of the crises and put together a working group, put together a panel of experts to talk about things. And, it's kind of the not Tea Party in politics, but a Tea Party solution where we always have a little party and we sit down, we talk about it, and we get a lot of money, billions of dollars out, and we hand it to the privatized industrial military. and all is good. They sell that to people, but the domestic population, I think they would be something that would be really taboo or frowned upon, to have an occupying force, an occupying military on U.S. soil. I guess not that shocking, or it doesn't seem to be bothering the people. Not that I'm, living in France. I don't know how the people really feel. We saw that tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people came out to support free speech and to support those that, to show that there is solidarity and that terrorism is not winning and is not, going to make people live in fear. And I love that. I mean, when you have people organically coming out, if that is the case, which I don't really think it is. I mean, when you saw how quickly all of these mass protests were staged and arranged, a lot of work has to go into those things. It'd be nice to believe that, just a bunch of altruistic good guys came up with some plan and put it out there on Twitter, and before you know it, we've got world leaders holding hands, talking about free speech and talking about how important it is to cherish these values, and that's why we have to fight terrorists, to protect things like free speech. And then France immediately finds people espousing free speech, using their free speech. One comedian in particular was arrested for making light of the situation. It's not illegal to say that you support ISIS, the beheading of media journalists. It's unclassy, it's uncouth, it's ugly, but it's not illegal to say, yeah, I think that's not a bad idea. You can't threaten people. You shouldn't, and it is illegal in most countries in the world to threaten anyone. And you'll definitely get more attention from the authorities if you are threatening the powerful and the rich, and you may just get sucked up in an FBI honeypot, like one gentleman did this week. If you decide to take to Twitter, and you're always going to have a contingency of people out there that see something on TV and they want to do it. Charles Manson. I mean, he's got a wife in waiting, I think, or I don't know if they actually got married, but you see the girl, and she's not horrible looking. I mean, pretty damn good for a guy that's incarcerated, that's 60 years old. She's in her 20s, I think. And you realize that she's just bat-ass crazy, but she is drawn to this man who's a mass murderer, by all accounts. And that's probably why she finds him attractive and probably wants to have his child. Average, normal, sane people would think that is pretty crazy. But, you find those kind of people out there that are going to say, yeah, man, beheading people's great. It's not illegal, but, these are the low-hanging fruit, the easy patsies, and they've been rounded up in France. So, the whole thing smacks of hypocrisy. When you talk about the media and I think that there's two things happening here. You have the people that believe that this is all a staged event, a false flag, if you will. And by every definition, going after your freedoms, even on its face, these guys, these terrorists, were already under the watchful eye of the French and European intelligence agencies. The CIA knew who they were. They were following their travel plans, even if you don't believe that they're probably training these gentlemen for this attack. It's not a shocker that they are terrorists, because we thought they were terrorists. We were watching them. I say figuratively, but the Western intelligence agencies were all over these guys, and just like almost every other foiled or botched or the terrorist attacks, the pretty piss poor attempts to attack the homeland that have happened post September 11, 2001. They themselves are A, usually pretty dim-witted people. B, usually not really a real threat. I mean, the latest is just a manifestation of the FBI. It's a plot that they put together. But you're going to have those kind of people that are going to really be drawn to these stories. So, and the fame and notoriety, people love attention, and it doesn't matter if it's good or bad attention. They're going to find it out there, and they're going to, attach themselves to whatever, wacky ideology you may have. So the problem is that there's always going to be people that are drawn. There's always going to be a certain segment of the population that's drawn to these events. And the FBI and all these agencies that purport to be protecting us seem to not be able to find real terrorists or even, find these guys. I mean, it wasn't that we didn't have the intelligence. It wasn't that they were using super encryption to hide their communications from law enforcement. None of those things are actually the case. And so the solution, if you saw the aforementioned speech by David Cameron and Barack Obama, he had a tea party. David Cameron said, we can't have encryption. We cannot have people talking in secret. Well, that in and of itself is a false flag. Okay, here's the solution. It has nothing to do with the problem. It's not even addressing the failures of the intelligence community. And that's why it's just so frustrating to, I know most of you out there, because if we really were going to go after the bad guys and we really did want to get tough on terrorism, then we would have an honest look. We wouldn't just have an immediate reaction before we've even buried these guys. They have new laws, new powers that they want to anoint themselves with. But we'd actually have an honest assessment. You would have people looking at the failures inside of the intelligence agencies, inside of the FBI and all of these other groups, and say, okay, well, what happened here? Let's really look at what we missed. Now, that would be an honest assessment, and you would think that would be what should happen. And the fact that it's not is so telling. It should be telling to anybody. Unfortunately, not enough people. The ones that aren't just, bent over in fear or just low information, low opinionated people. And I don't want to disparage anybody out there that just gets their news from 20-second sound bites, because I have friends that are those same exact people. But I think it's harder and harder and harder to sell the solution, which is we can protect you from terrorism if you give us more power. Well, they're doing a pretty bad job of it, and there's not a real honest look at what they could do. And most of you already know that that's not really that's not the plan. Terrorism, actually, it's cui bono for the state. They always amass more power. They amass more money, bigger budgets. They create new jobs for friends and other fellow bureaucrats. They create not just jobs for themselves inside of government, but also private industries dedicated to protecting the wealthy and to be able to extort those that get caught up in the surveillance dragnet. I mean, that's one of the very overlooked aspects of all of this. And that is when your elected leaders are being surveilled and none of their communications are private, then they can't act with any kind of autonomy, and they are subject, and I would imagine most are somewhat blackmailed. I mean, if the U.S. government, if the NSA is listening to Angela Merkel, I mean, they know what she's saying to Vladimir Putin in Russian. They know everybody she's calling, and they can, definitely use that power against her. And it's a good way to assess who's a friend and foe, and who is on board or not on board with the plan. So It's really, I don't even I think most people, they just look at it as, well, it doesn't matter because I don't have anything to hide. Well, maybe you don't. I mean, you absolutely do. You have everything to hide. You have everything to protect. You're not just some consumer. You're not just some, statistic. You're a human being, and you have your own rights that are inalienable. They are unalienable. You cannot lean on them. And a lot of people don't believe that those are necessary any longer to live in a free society. Sadly. But if you just thought about, well, if I'm electing people that are compromised, if there are agents inside of the government that know every dirty little fetish that your congressperson has, they can be pretty much nullified and compromised. So that's what I garner from most of this. One of the things I thought was just so blatantly propagandistic is the pictures. Of course, we had the hypocrisy walk, and that is you had Benjamin Netanyahu alongside the leader of Abbas, as well as Angela Merkel, Francis Holland, and other world leaders that came to stage a photo op in front of, to make it seem like they were leading tens of thousands of people in France. Solidarity for Charlie Hebdo. And I mean, just the fact that that they would, position themselves to make it seem as if all these people are following them is disingenuous on its face. But they went farther. Okay, Benjamin Netanyahu photoshopped out the Abbas leader on pictures that you could still find readily available on Twitter, on his actual Twitter feed. I was looking at those before the show just to make sure that he hadn't changed them back. We also have a Jewish Orthodox newspaper, just one of many of the Jewish newspapers that decided that, this woman here, Angela Merkel, one of the other ladies that was in the front row, let's just get rid of them. Now, if an American paper or even a Protestant paper did that, I imagine somebody would get, the misogyny label, and there would be a lot of rigmarole, a lot of bullcrap. People would be really upset about photoshopping out women because, they're inferior and they should, in their mind, they should be, I guess, cooking food and back home. I don't know. I mean, it's not so much that I care that the publishers of this ultra-Orthodox newspaper decided that, or believe that women are inferior to men. That doesn't shock me. I mean, it's kind of only within the last couple hundred years have we really addressed those kind of issues. And traditionally, women didn't have a right to vote in this country. It's only in the last 100 or so years that we even started talking about those kind of things. But in this day and age, that they thought they could get away with it and that nobody would notice. And it's just a complete contempt for your own readers. I mean, my God, this doesn't look right. There's no women here. Who's reading your paper? I mean, who are you lying to? You're lying to yourself and you're lying to your readers by photoshopping them out. So just the amount of a complete disregard for the truth, for accuracy in reporting is, I think, the biggest takeaway. You talk about how the media and the government, at least I do, how they manipulate and they lie to people and they create propaganda. I mean, 101, creating a world where the only choice is the one that is being put forward. And if you're not on board, then you're anti-American or you're whatever it may be. I mean, you're anti-gay, you're anti-woman, you're anti-equal rights, you're anti-whatever it may be. In that kind of climate, no one, except for maybe the few in the alternative media, have called them out on that. So It's like, I hate to sidebar here, but going back to Sandy Hook, you look at a lot of the media reporting and the video footage, and even some of the sigils and remembrances, and the video footage that we saw, much of it was manipulated. Now, that leads a lot of people, including myself, to say, well, how much of this is real? How many of these people are actors? And so people will see the extras in the background on some of this footage. CNN's Anderson Cooper playing this video footage of these police officers over and over again on loop, running in and going into this school that was obviously not the Sandy Hook school, led to a huge conspiracy on the internet. Maybe some of you subscribe to that. All of these people were crisis actors, and this is a complete and absolute hoax, because these people have popped up in other news footage. They've popped up in other places. One of the children from Sandy Hook popped up in a death count for terrorists. I think they were Palestinian terrorists. I know some of you out there will tweet me and correct me, but one of the boys popped up in all of these different posters that they have. And see, when you have this complete disregard for caring about accuracy, and when you have media just grabbing, B-roll stock film and using that and playing it because they don't care, and they don't care if, I guess, people, the few, notice that they're playing this, just stock footage and pretending that it's real. It leads to a grand conspiracy that people believe that all of these people are crisis actors. The truth is probably, more than likely, much of the footage, much of the people that you saw in these videos and in the footage and the coverage in the days after the attack, the killing spree that happened at Sandy Hook, they just, half of the stuff that we saw wasn't real. And so what you've seen has it's completely excuse me, fighting a little cough here. It's completely absent of reality. And so I see this over and over again. I see it all the time. It's so in your face, and if you have eyes to see and you pay attention to it, you'll notice these things happening over and over again. You're like, hey, I saw that guy. He was a doctor in some other clip. Who is that guy? I've seen him before. You absolutely have. So it's not, I know that people are going to attack me for making these comments. Doug, you're just so naive. You don't see the grander picture here at Sandy Hook. I absolutely do. And when it comes to false flags, what I have noted over the last year, and I'm sure most of you have as well, is that the truth rarely matters because it's so ephemeral. It's news events and crises that happen in sound bites that justify executive orders, that justify quick responses without almost any kind of scrutiny. And they just keep pushing things forward day after day, new legislation that does not address any of the core or root issues. So, that's my big takeaway from what's happened here, is that the media has really shown itself and has manipulated so many of the different events that have taken place that it's hard to make heads or tails of what's actually happened. Did that police officer really get shot in the head? Where's the blood, man? Where's the blood? It's a great question, and I don't have a great answer for you. I would say that there's a big problem with it, in the fact that no one wants to address this. And if you do, you're immediately relegated to being some crazy whack nut. Anyway, so let's see, other things happening in France. Had a couple other things I wanted to talk about here. Holland said that he was furious that Netanyahu participated. A little lip service for his domestic population that's already livid and probably not big fans. We've already seen a lot of right-wing nationalism popping up in France, and nothing, not to disparage people that believe in a nation state, but I've addressed a lot of that over the last few weeks, and people kind of attacking me because I'm not a huge fan of the nation state. I'm not trying to save some continental area, and I get this a lot. Well, what about this new world order they're creating? It's like, well, the new world order is really trying to solidify the old world order. This right here, along with, this Italian Prime Minister, Matteo Renzi. He had the perfect solution. He's calling for a new EU intelligence agency. They're talking about putting together a new EU army, creating an EU Patriot Act. So, if it wasn't this act, which, when you really look at killing 10, 12, 13 people at a media outlet, it's a big deal, but when you compare it to the atrocities that happen on almost a daily basis here on planet Earth, and the amount of bloodshed and senseless death, it's not worthy of all of the attention and the pop-up, ready-made police state that they have ready for us, to say the least. So there you go. One of the things I saw that I thought was really interesting, Michael Vale, one of our editors at blacklistednews.com, had posted this article from the World Bulletin, and mentioning the New World Order or the Old World Order. This one kind of struck a chord with me. It came out of World Bulletin. French colonial tax still enforced in Africa. You think about how we're basically giving billions of dollars to Africa to fight, just one example, Ebola. Where's the money going? Who's really fighting Ebola with this money? Is it going to despot dictators that are, hoarding drugs? Probably. Who knows? You see so little with, physically being done with the money that is allegedly being spent. Same thing in Afghanistan. Well, what did we build with all these, billions upon billions of dollars? We spent $7.1 billion trying to eradicate opium. So where's all that money? Well, there's a base there, a dilapidated, half-built base that was never finished. You're like, okay, and so where did the rest of the money go? You start asking questions. It's like it doesn't add up. You spent how many billions of dollars, and all we have is a junky 57 Chevy? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Well, anyway, one of the things that doesn't make a lot of sense is that we give a lot of money to the African nations, which in a lot of instances have taken money, and warlords, despots, cannibals, CIA assets, people that have been trained in the West and go back and subjugate their own people. The story is as long as I can remember, as long as you can find. All the way back to basically the beginning of imperialism, there have been people that have been trying to conquer and have enslaved those in Africa, and the French, they're still doing it. They can't. I can't believe that my tax dollars are actually going to Africa to then pay French taxes that are still in place. And when you really think about this, what benefit are the African people receiving from their French occupiers? Probably little to none. When Guinea demanded independence from the French colonial rule back in 1958, the French unleashed their fury with more than 3,000 leaving the country, taking their entire property. In addition, they destroyed anything that could be taken, destroying schools, nurseries, public administration buildings, cars, books, medicine, Research Institute. Instruments, tractors were crushed and sabotaged, animals killed, and food in warehouses were burned or poisoned. In effect, they were sending a message to all other colonies that the consequences for rejecting France would be high. So when you look at, the mess in Africa, you're like, oh my God, these people are living in a mess. It's just, how did we get to this place? And you start looking at the history and what the French have done, and it is just deplorable. It is. It's pretty disgusting. And this is basically a little nanny boo-boo. If you don't want to be our slaves, then we're just going to take our ball and go home, and we're going to, make life living hell for you people. And they've been doing that till present day. 1958 was when they really, that break with colonialism, and then the beginning of kind of the end for the relationship, the somewhat cordial relationship between the African governments and their pre-colonial rulers. Colonialism as an enduring stain in Africa's history and economic oppression continuing to exist. An article by Dr. Kuatin, a peace activist and editor for SiliconAfrica.com, addressed this practice. The article called attention to an ongoing practice by which former African countries are forced to pay colonial taxes to France. In fact, France continues to thrive on the practice, which extracts approximately $500 billion annually from African countries each year. And I just thought that was, something that was phenomenally high. I mean, $500 billion from people that have no money, that live in squalor. And when you start listening to all of these utopian, socialist rhetoric ideas that people like Francis Holland have, I mean, they had to renege on the, 75% tax for millionaires. Basically, they had no art. I mean, a place that is, a haven for artists and for the European art. The people that actually make it couldn't afford to live there any longer. I mean, why would you want to? Why would you want to give that much money to the government? But even in all of that, and the colonial ties, and bad mismanagement of capital, you then realize these guys are getting $500 billion from people that are eating mud cakes. I mean, how heinous is that? It's pretty telling. And they go on to give the French side, and they believe it's perfectly fine. It's okay. It's not a big deal. The shift in capital and resources is becoming pretty. I mean, we have a euro that is under a lot of strain. The U.S. dollar, all-time high. We've fracked the dollar to new levels, and now we're starting to see the comeback down in investments. I mean, people that were highly leveraged in the oil markets are feeling the pain right now. Though, I mean, they make it sound as if $40 a barrel oil is going to blow up the economy, and that there's just nothing that we can do, and if we go this far, it's going to have these cataclysmic events that are triggered by it. And people here in Texas, where I live, are going to go bankrupt. And you realize, well, that was part of the boom. That was part of the recovery. It was just fracking the hell out of this country and creating a bunch of jobs in the oil industry. And that has run its pace. And now you're going to see the environmental devastation, because these fracking companies are basically abandoning not only their equipment and their projects and capital investment, but also the toxic waste that is left afterwards, and cutting corners. We're going to see that devastation, and probably the American people will really grasp it and wrap their minds around how badly we have treated the aquifers and our country for temporary prosperity, which we are still riding high on. But things are changing for the petrodollar. The French, well, first off, the euro, okay, has been depegged. The Swiss, said that they would peg their Swiss franc to the euro. And, it sounds like a good idea. And, we had this consensus amongst the European technocrats, the elite, that there would be these agreements. And once you get to the point where, and this is what central planners and central banks' plan was, and that was, if we leave interest rates at near zero, if we give money away for free to banks, not to you and I, but to banks, that is going to create economic prosperity. Now, lots of money has been printed, and some of it has trickled down to the economy. I mean, it does trickle down, but the amount of usury and lending and the financialization of this money has really created a blockade to economic prosperity. If the government gives J.P. Morgan or Goldman Sachs $100 and they keep 99 of it for getting you the dollar, and that's basically what we have here, then the economic prosperity for some, for the upper 1% of the 1%, the wealth is skyrocketed. But for probably 85, 90, some people, I hate to say 99 because it's just a populist term, but the majority of people just don't see that. So they had a bright idea in Europe, and that was negative interest rates. That is basically you put your money into the bank and they take your money just to hold it for you, to use your money. And because there's no incentive for them to really hold your money because there's no interest being made. These near zero or even negative interest rates, they're not effective. They do not produce the required result, and you can only print money for so long and see that kind of positive return. So the Swiss have decided to depeg. What does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean the end for the euro dollar. It doesn't mean the end for even a euro peg, but it does put more pressure, and it's really when we live in a society that is so dependent upon perception. Perception is reality, and the perceived reality probably means more than actual reality does. If we have a perception the dollar's strong, and there's a global demand for that, and there is safety or the allure of safety, then you're going to have people that are going to want dollars. I mean, if you're living in Greece, if you're living in Lithuania, if you're living even in maybe Switzerland, you're wondering what's happening. If you're living in the Eurozone, if you're living in France, you might want US dollars. Now, I know a lot of people listening to the show are saying, why would you want those worthless fiat, centrally controlled debt instruments? Why would you want that over something else? Well, compare it to its other underclassmen, compare it to its other brethren, fiat currencies, and you can pick which one you want the most, or which one you think is going to stand the test of time, or at least last longer. They all die. It's just a matter of which one dies first and which one you're holding. A lot of people are seeing the I wouldn't even call it a crash. There are those that are the anti-Bitcoiners, or those that see Bitcoin as, I don't know, as the people that see it as a libertarian solution to centrally controlled government and centrally controlled and issued money. Those people, I think, are a little naive because we have Ross Ulbricht. He is on trial for the Silk Road. He was the guy behind the Silk Road, and he was tied up in Mount Gox, and they're now saying that he may have been the guy behind. He was the Dread Pirate Roberts, and I don't know if he was or wasn't. And I'll be honest. I mean, I don't really care that much as to his involvement. But one of the things that's interesting is that no one will really bash the blockchain. It's a really neat and just very, very powerful and useful system. If you don't understand the blockchain, it's fine. You can Google it and kind of wrap your mind around how Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies are created and other systems that could run or use that same type of blockchain, the underlying programming, the structure for it. So even the haters, the doubters, the skeptics still find a lot of value in that. But it's come down. I think it just dipped under $200. People are like, "Oh, the Bitcoin is crashing, Doug. It's just crashing. It's on its way down." Well, there's two reasons that it went up, and that was that A, there was the manipulation of it by Mt. Gox and through the Silk Road and that whole narrative, or B, that you had tons of people in places like Cyprus and other oligarchs that when you look at what's happened in Ukraine, people trying to get into some other kind of currency, and because of capital controls. That's why Russia has outlawed Bitcoin. It's not very nationalistic, and you could try to spend your Bitcoin in Venezuela, where, according to Maduro, his latest statement, the quote of the day is that we need deeper socialism to solve the problems that they have there today. And obviously, free markets, free minds, and free will are not the solutions that they foresee for their little utopians. But so I like Bitcoin because it's an X factor. It's something that it stirs the debate. It makes the government nervous, and it itself might not be revolutionary, and it might not be completely anonymous. And that's what they're saying, is that you can pretty much track every Bitcoin ever. If you can get a person's wallet, if you can get to their computer, then you can track every Bitcoin, where it came from, whose IP address. I mean, all of that is kept, all of that metadata. And one of the things that I've heard sold is that it's complete anonymity. And that's where a lot of people go wrong and have a misconception. They sell Bitcoin as this, truly unique and completely anonymous currency that you can use. And so now people are realizing, whoa, you can't just send money digitally to another person without there being a potential for that transaction to be known by others. Now, not to say that every transaction, if you have the best wallet out there and you're using high-tech crypto transactions, you might be 10 times smarter than I and ahead of the game. But there's always that potential. And there is this idea that just because somebody independently, issues credit or issues money, that they're going to be more honest and better at creating something that, I would still call it fiat, not because I understand that fiat can be printed without any basis. You can fractionalize and rehypothecate debt and create more and more. But, in the real world, there might only... There shouldn't be only so many Bitcoins, that there is a max out. There is only so many that are allegedly allowed to be created into circulation. But is that really the fact? Can you actually create more? And I always believe that there's somebody out there smart enough to say, hey man, I can fake hash these Bitcoins. Well, people have been doing that. Alchemy. I was reading an interesting piece on that, and it's kind of that transition. Alchemy was dangerous and was outlawed. People, mostly those colonial masters, the aforementioned and British governments, were very, very worried about alchemists because they thought, hey, these guys might be able to create gold. They might be able to create wealth and be able to devalue our coinage. So it was illegal. I mean, Francis Bacon, other famous alchemists were demonized. And the state, which was the church at the time, basically equated them to devils for daring to make more gold or to be able to create new and possibly tainted or salted metals. And that's ultimately what happened. The government, even with the barbaric tactics of yesteryear, was unable to keep that from happening. And it wasn't the average people or your local scientist or alchemist that was creating fractionalized wealth. It was actually the people in government that were cutting coins and robbing the people. So the government should have been looking within for the criminals rather than trying to paint all those out there that were just basically trying to conduct scientific experiments rather than having a witch hunt and demonizing all of them and setting them on fire. They would have been better off looking at their own treasurers. Interestingly enough, one of the things that used to be a big meme, and I don't know if it is anymore, is that China is going to own the United States of America. What are we going to do with all this Chinese debt? And I kind of was on that bandwagon too. I mean, how much debt can we give to the Chinese government? And at what point do they just own everything? When are all those dollars coming home? Well, interestingly enough, Japan is now set to surpass China as America's largest creditor. What a wonderful world we live in here in America, for all of you Americans, where our debt is being bought by every other country in the world. People want U.S. debt. Don't ask me why. I can't tell you, but they've got quite a great little scheme going on. But this is drastically changing the landscape. It is maybe a good thing, okay, follow me here, to have somebody who is potentially a military ally that wants to export weapons, that needs to be able to protect itself, holding more U.S. Treasury debt than somebody who is a foe. We harken back to 2008, where the Russians talked to the Chinese. If this actually happened, I know, I try to address the official narrative, although I'm skeptical that it's actually true. But that the Russians proposed sinking or tanking the U.S. dollar. So if you're worried about economic weapons of mass destruction, it's always good to have a friend that you owe money to rather than maybe a foe that could use that against you. But what a transition. So we see the U.S. dollar being shunned in Asia, especially with China creating a lifeline for South America. If you haven't noted, and I don't know if this is a positive thing, see, this is where we get into this whole debate, which is better, which is worse, and who's the good guys and who's the bad guys. Well, anyway, some guys that I think kind of, because they thumb their nose and talk a good game about the evilness of America, Rafael Correa is a fine example. He is the president of Ecuador, as well as the Bolivian president. His name escapes me at the moment. I can see his face. But Maduro, Venezuelan president, the successor to Hugo Chavez. They are looking to China to find an economic solution to their problems. These are oil states, and they have pegged most of their lifeline to oil, and they've got plenty of it, and there are countries like China that need it. And so the governments across South America, including Brazil, even in other BRIC nations like India, we're seeing a lot more usage of Chinese renminbi, yuan, currency trades that are now outside of the U.S. dollar. That leads a lot of dollar skeptics to say, well, this is going to tank the U.S. dollar. This is just one of the many things that's going to push the U.S. into a deflationary state. And I think there's a great argument to be made for that. Now, what will China give these countries, and how will that really benefit their people? Because, one of the biggest criticisms that we have of the IMF and the World Bank is that they give countries loans with money that they don't have, your money, U.S. tax dollars primarily, Western tax dollars, to despots, dictators, socialists. They take said money, and in most cases, because either taking money from China is kind of tricky, because they love to do infrastructure programs, but they always bring their own populace, their own people to do the work. So, like what's happening in Nicaragua with this huge new parallel canal to the Panama Canal. This is definitely going to rival U.S. dominance in the region. It's going to challenge the Panamanian government and their authority. It's going to breed all sorts of new industries and contentious people, mad people throughout the region. So, it's going to be interesting to see if these plans, if these plots actually come to fruition, if there's so much domestic, anguish, if we see, literally, disenfranchised, South Americans engaging in terrorism, trying to undo what is being done with China. That will be, a very interesting thing to watch, because quite frankly, the U.S. dollar, I don't know if it's any more evil than, the deals that you're going to get with the Chinese, or if they're going to be any more advantageous or any better proportioned. It's great to have an investment fund. It's great to develop countries and help people build sustainable markets. I love the idea. Most of you do too. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, these people they're sitting on prime land. They want to work. They're ready to create products that the Western world needs, whether it's foodstuffs, whether it's, tobacco, you name it, whatever it may be. It's a good thing. It helps everybody. The problem is where you have a parasitic system that uses that as leverage to take the wealth, rather than to fairly or freely trade with these nations and to help them create something that is a long-term benefit for those people and the investors. You have that being used as a tool, and that's what the IMF and the World Bank have continued to do. It's going to be interesting to see if China can do a better job. If China does a better job investing in infrastructure and does a better job than the International Monetary Fund, that's pretty telling and pretty sad, let me tell you. So while all of this is happening, nobody's really paying attention to Syria, where, just reported today, the U.S. is going to send 1,000 troops to train moderates and to arm the moderate military that will be fighting, I don't know, Bashar al-Assad, each other, the people that will be receiving weapons. More than likely will be ISIS sympathizers, who knows? But the idea that we are just going to start dropping heavy armament into these regions and think that there is going to be a positive outcome is pure insanity. It really is. It really is. And the fact that it is pretty much a done deal and that there's almost no public scrutiny in the media at all for what I think is just egregious and will ultimately, result in bloodshed and more anti-American sentiment in the region is full steam ahead. And that is one of the power plays. And I think ultimately the West's hope for salvation on so many different fronts. We're losing the war on terror. We're losing the war on drugs. We are losing the war for the hearts and minds of the world. And we are losing the economic engine that has been so advantageous to people in the West, especially in the United States, that, when the rubber meets the road within just a few years, if these development plans take shape and the continued shift away from the dollar towards whatever it may be, new world currency, the Goldman Sachs version of Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. I mean, where it goes, nobody knows, but it's going to be an interesting ride. We will continue to narrate that story each and every day at blacklistednews.com. I've got a lot of things that are in the hopper that'll be coming forward in the next few weeks. You can, if you've listened to the show, you deserve to be one of the people there at blacklistednation.com. We have a new hybrid comment/forum that we are beta testing because the discuss system is very limited. It is something that's widely popular, and because it's so popular and because it's a central system, just like Facebook or just like Twitter, it becomes highly co-opted because, if you can game the discuss system, then you can game, 20, 30, 40 websites. So it becomes a bigger target for those that want to manipulate. And, you have groups of people that come by and flag and vote up each other. And it's amazing the type of things that people will actually do to move a few comments around on a website. Needless to say, it is kind of a benefit. I debated for months, actually a few years, whether or not we actually wanted to have a system where people could comment, because I thought that it would possibly take away from the conversation or from not the conversation, but from the content, and turn it into more of an internalized conversation and turning it into what sometimes happens, and that is, a debate outside of the discussion, relevant to the topic. And so I think the comments have been an addition and have been a benefit and allow people to, expand the discussion. Even when you ask or say stupid things, it still sparks, and not to, disparage anybody for saying stupid things. I'm the first one, that's what I tell people all the time. Stupid question. Okay. I'm just going to ask this stupid question because, sometimes the obvious things or the seemingly obvious things are the things that we miss. And so with that, I think that it's going to be an interesting experiment just to see how this will work. Whereas rather than just having people respond to and comment on certain articles, they can actually create topics, submit news, and the like. So we'll be working at that. blacklistednation.com. It's a work in progress. All of the news articles from blacklistednews.com after a few minutes are then aggregated into the system automatically. So if you made it into this podcast, then you should be there. And it'll be one of the few places I'll probably, outside of Twitter, interact and create content, because it's something that's not a centralized system. One day, the discuss people or somebody else at some other company aren't going to say, well, there's no profit in this, let's just delete it. Those things, and taking more control over, your own infrastructure is something that I think we absolutely have to do. And if we've learned anything this week, it's that the government wants to take over all communication. And so I think taking back some of that and putting it in-house on our own servers it's a good step forward. It's a good place to be. So with that, I want to thank all of you for being part of this live broadcast here on this 18th day of January 2015. As always, my name is Doug Owen, and I want to thank you for listening to the show. I really do appreciate it. If you can support us, you can do that at blacklistedradio.com/support. Make a donation. Contribute to independent, commercial-free, agenda-free content where the listener is the only person that is producing the show. That's you out there. Thank you for doing so. I'll be back next weekend, Sunday evening, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time for another live edition of Blacklisted Radio. Until then, take care.